Okay, guys, the next part of our lesson is we're going to move on to circles and circumference. So if you forgot any of your parts of a circle, I gave you a little diagram. Center is in the middle. Radius is the distance from the center to any point on the circle. Diameter is the distance across the circle through the center. Keep in mind that the radius is half of the diameter, or you could think of it as the diameter is twice the radius. You're going to need that for a couple problems that we do here. So, circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle. Which, if we're thinking about it, the circumference is just the perimeter of the circle. Calculating circumference of a circle, 2 pi r. For this class, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. So if you're using a calculator, don't use the pi button. Actually use 3.14, type it in. If you're using your phone, that shouldn't be a problem. Just type in 3.14. And then also keep in mind, r is radius. And then 2 pi r is how you calculate circumference. Examples. Find the circumference of the flying disc. Use 3.14 for pi. So, circumference, we just said, was 2 pi r. First thing I'm looking at is we've got a 5. Is that in fact your radius? And the answer to that is yes. So the circumference is 2 times pi, which we're going to use 3.14, times the radius, which is 5. Grab your calculator. 2 times 3.14 times 5. I got circumference equals 31.4, and we're dealing in inches, so 31.4 inches. Next one. Find the circumference of the watch face. Use 3.14 for pi. Again, circumference, 2 pi r. This time, take a look at your 28. Take a look at the line that goes the whole way across. Is that, in fact, your radius? No, that's your diameter. So we have to take 28, we have to cut it in half, because half of your diameter is your radius, which is going to give us 14. So circumference, 2 times pi, which again we're going to use 3.14, times your radius, which we said was 14. Grab your calculator. 2 times 3.14 times 14, and I got 87.92 millimeters. Next one, find the perimeter of the semicircle. Use 3.14 for pi. So perimeter of a semicircle, half of a circle. Now, they want the perimeter, which is the distance around the whole outside, and this part I'm going to start with first is I'm going to start with this part right here, because that's part of a circle, so we should be thinking circumference. Circumference equals 2 pi r. Is 6 your radius? No, it goes the whole way across, that's your diameter, so 6 divided by 2 is 3, which is in fact your radius. So that would go from here over to there. Okay, circumference equals 2 times 3.14 times 3. So circumference equals 2 times 3.14 times 3. I'm getting 18.84. Now that is if I had the whole circle, because that's circumference of a whole circle, but we don't have a whole circle. So think about this for a minute. What do you have to do with 18.84? And I'm hoping you're thinking divide by 2, because we only want the upper half. So divide by 2, and I'm getting 9.42. And then I'm going to put that in a box and keep it, because that is not the perimeter of the entire semicircle. That's just the part I have outlined in red. What about this part down here? Because that's also part of the perimeter. So that part down there is 6. So we've got to take our 9.42. We've got to add on the 6, which I'm getting 15.42. And then we're working in meters. So your entire perimeter of your semicircle is 15.42 meters. Next one. The circumference of the roll of caution tape decreases 10.5 inches after a firefighter uses some of the tape. What is the radius of the roll after the firefighter uses the tape? So let's think about this for a minute. I'm looking at my caution tape, and it looks like we're starting with a circumference of 31.4 inches. And I want to know the radius after he uses the tape. Well, it tells me that the circumference is going to decrease by 10.5 inches. Okay, so I have the circumference is 31.4. That's going to decrease, which means subtract, by 10.5 inches, which means 31.4 minus 10.5. The new circumference is going to be 20.9 inches after he uses the tape. But they don't want the circumference. They want to know the radius. Okay, so let's think about this. Circumference equals 2 pi r. Well, I know the circumference is 20.9. So instead of c, I can substitute 20.9 equals 2 times pi, which we're going to use 3.14, times radius. And I want to know what the radius is, which means I have to solve for that variable. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 times 3.14, which is going to give me 6.28. So now I have 20.9 equals 6.28 times r. And then I'm really trying to get that r by itself. So if I want to get 6.28 times r, the opposite of times is divide. So I'm going to divide by 6.28. I'm going to divide by 6.28, which is going to leave me r over there. And then grab your calculator. 20.9 divided by 6.28 is 3.328, and then I get a 0.25. I get a whole bunch of decimals, but I'm gonna just call that good. And we're dealing in inches, so I know the radius of my caution roll tape is about 3 inches after the firefighter uses the tape. Okay, the radius of a dog's collar should be at least ½ inch larger than the radius of the dog's neck. A dog collar adjusts to a circumference of 10 to 14 inches should the collar be worn by a dog with a neck circumference of 12.5 inches. Explain. Okay, so I'm going to start with the dog. So I know that the dog has a neck circumference of 12.5 inches. But up here, they're talking about the radius has to be ½ inch larger. So I know the circumference, but that doesn't really help me because I need the radius. So starting with the dog, or the actual dog, I'll go down here. We know that circumference equals 2 pi r. So we know that the circumference of the dog's neck is 12.5 inches. And that equals 2 times pi times r. Kind of like we just did on the last example. So just like we did on the last example, I'm going to take 2 times 3.14, which is 6.28. So 12.5 equals 6.28 times r. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 6.28. So 12.5 divided by 6.28, which is 1.99. And are we talking about inches here? Yes, inches. Is the radius of the dog's neck. Okay, keep a hold of that. Now, the collar should be a ½ inch larger than the radius of the dog's neck, which means now we have to find the radius of the dog collar. Well, the circumference could be anywhere between 10 to 14 inches. Well, I'm going to go with the 14 inches because that's as big as I can make the collar. I can't make it any bigger than that. I can make it smaller if I want to, that's great, but you can't make it any bigger. That's kind of where you're maxed out. So I'm going to do collar. Circumference equals 2 pi r. The circumference of the collar at its largest is 14 inches, equals 2 times pi times r. I'm going to solve it the same way. So 14 equals 6.28 times r. I'm going to divide both sides by 6.28. Grab your calculator. 14 divided by 6.28. So I'm getting 2.23. And then we're going to compare. So this is the dog's neck. That's his radius. This is the dog collar. And the dog collar is supposed to be at least a ½ inch bigger than the dog's neck. So 2.23 minus 1.99. And I'm getting 0.24. Is that at least a ½ inch larger? And the answer is no. So what was the actual question here? Should the collar be worn by the dog? No. Not large enough.